Hello, Substackers, and welcome to new subscribers who prefer an audiovisual format over written material. My name is Penny, and this is Transforming Trauma, the main title of my newsletter blog here on Substack. There are two subsections within the Transforming Trauma blog: Penny's Ponder, which are just random ideas and thoughts, and Spirit Matters, a larger subsection dedicated to my interpretation of ancient spiritual teachings. This podcast includes audiovisual formats from posts in all three sections and will cover topics such as trauma healing techniques, ancient spiritual practices, and personal reflections. Podcast notes and, of course, the written version include all the links to the books and videos that I mentioned. Remember, this podcast is not just a monologue, but a conversation. Your thoughts and your aha moments and your resonances are what make this community vibrant and alive. Don't hesitate to leave a comment and share your voice. It truly matters here. Today's post is entitled, "What Am I Sending Out into the Universe?" And it was first published November 15th, 2023. Been reading through the revised edition of John Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, considering his idea of toxic shame. In the Homecoming video series and his book, John reveals many of his childhood wounds. He openly talks about specific things that happened in his childhood and explains how those experiences are now categorized as abusive. In the preface to the revised edition, he writes, "At the time, the material on shame was tremendously helpful to me personally, but I had no idea of its impact on the public." He goes on to say, "In the intervening years, I've enriched my understanding of the importance of healthy shame in forming our sense of identity, in guarding our honor and dignity, in safeguarding our spirituality, and in forming our conscience." To me, the key words are enriched, at the time, and intervening years. That tells me that once he healed his wounds, the material read differently to him. I found that too. When I go back and reread books, I understand the information differently because I've gathered a pile of additional information and healed many of the childhood wounds. That means that I'm no longer viewing the idea from the same wounded place I was when I first read the book, so my mind is now open to new perspectives. Here's the thing about what we think we know as I understand it. Our understanding of an experience is formed at the time of the experience with the level of understanding we had at that time. So if we were 7 years old when something happened, then we have a 7-year-old's perspective of that memory. Only when we revisit those memories from an adult perspective can we either resolve the hurt feelings through that adult perspective, or if we keep using the memory as a reference, we'll contribute to the initial trauma by adding more emotional filters and will add narrative. For example, when my grandfather beat me until I peed myself, I didn't know that what that was abuse. I definitely thought he was mean, but I wasn't capable at the time of forming a narrative that said that I was abused or attaching a label of abuser to my grandfather. In fact, that memory was buried so deep in my body and only resurfaced during regressive hypnosis. In other words, I learned that my grandfather was abusive when I was older. If you haven't read about that post, you can do so in the beginning. My body remembered the beating, but my conscious mind didn't. I didn't know that this memory would surface during that regressive hypnosis session. I was there trying to heal a phobia that my psychologist and I assumed was attached to the first surgical experience I had as that 9-10-year-old. If you haven't read about that one, you can do so in the first surgery post. As it turned out, we didn't figure out which experience was at the root of the phobia. So the phobia wasn't resolved. Instead, we discovered there was early childhood abuse trapped in my body. Initially, it was the pain of his hand on my arm that I remembered. During the hypnosis, I recalled feeling the twisting of the skin on my arm as his hand was in such a tight grip. His other one was beating my butt. My psychologist had to calm me down several times during that regression and remind me that I was safe, I was in his office, and that it was only a memory. He could see the fear that I was feeling. My body tensed, my temperature rose, and I looked scared. In my mind's eye, I was watching the memory as if it was a movie, and I was feeling the same intensity of fear that I felt at that time. I remembered afterwards my grandmother cleaning me up saying, there, child. And I remember asking her, what did I do wrong? But she didn't have an answer. Since that regressive hypnosis session, I've recalled that memory several times. And every time my eyes would fill with tears and my heart would feel heavy. And I felt sorry for that little penny. Well, I think it's important to get all the yuck out. I wonder if sometimes when we do reflective work such as this, we make things worse rather than better. Am I releasing more emotional pain and healing a little more every time I recall that memory? Or am I adding intensity to the narrative, creating a bigger issue? As I understand it, the mind's process works like this. We have an experience, we form a conclusion, which is another way of saying we form a narrative, at the level of understanding we had at that time. Then we store that information in what I call the filing cabinets of our mind. The narratives are then used as reference points by our mind's process. I like things simple, so I use only 3 cabinets. The first cabinet is neutral, where all the experiences that don't have emotional content are filed. For me, these are everyday kinds of things. Examples are going for a walk, or reading a book, or watching a movie, or going out for dinner. The next cabinet is the love cabinet, where all the positive memories are housed. These are times when I felt loved and excited and happy and joyful and purposeful. This filing cabinet also houses all of my accomplishments and the success stories. The third cabinet, the fear cabinet, houses all the painful experiences. This is where the skeletons are and where the wounds are. These are the experiences where I felt abused and bullied, belittled, berated. These are intensely scary memories in here, partly because these are the most referenced memories. Every time our mind's process references and agrees with a prior experience, we add another narrative to that file. The similar emotions we felt are also attached to the experience, and that makes it intensified. I think of adding it as another colored filter to that file. The file could get incredibly thick if we have hundreds of similar negative experiences. These are how emotional walls are built. The mind's process will always justify itself to itself. So the more often we revisit a negative experience without resolving it, which to me means understanding it from a different perspective and letting go of the negative emotions attached to it, the more we become entrenched in that thought. Academics like to use the term cognitive bias. We all have them, but not all of us are willing to admit that we have them, nor are we willing to reassess those biases to see if we might have maybe been mistaken or if new information might change those. The most important thing to remember is facts change when new information becomes available, which ultimately means there's no such thing as a fact. You know the saying, birds of a feather flock together? If we continually regurgitate the same ideas, say categorizing specific experiences as trauma or labeling people with disorders, that idea or that story will become so rigid that eventually it becomes a brick. Those bricks get mortared in and the wall becomes harder to penetrate. Unless I'm willing to let go of the hurt feelings stored in my body, I'm not going to heal. And to do that, I have to feel it all over again. I don't know who came up with it, but somebody said you have to feel it to heal it. My point is that the more we agree with a story or a narrative or an idea, ours or somebody else's, the stronger and more powerful that idea becomes. If that idea has tons of negative energy attached in the form of a negative emotion, then what are we collectively sending out into the universe? Thanks for taking the time to watch or listen or both. I hope you heard something today that can help you help yourself. Thanks for being a part of this transformative journey with me. Your support, whether it's through liking, commenting, or sharing this podcast, is invaluable. If you're enjoying the content, consider joining my Substack community. Together, we can delve deeper into transforming our trauma through ancient teachings and continue our shared exploration of the healing process. That's it for today. And remember, you are not defined by your wounds. You have the power to transform and grow beyond them. I believe in the potential for your healing and change, and I hope you do too. See you next time.